Hi guys, welcome to Horsemanship from Ginny podcast. I'm Yaz. I own Horsemanship from Ginny. This podcast is going to just be me just talking a little bit about my past, where I've come from, what I've done. Just a little bit more about me rather than just what I offer and what I currently do. So I grew up South Lincolnshire, North Cambridgeshire border, near Peterborough, just north of Peterborough. My dad was a horsey person when he was younger. He largely got me into horses, got me fixed on them. I had riding lessons at riding schools from 4 years old, on and off, up until my early tween years, I think it gets called these days. And at 13 years old, my mum bought me Ginny. So I'm not going to go from before Ginny because most of my training journey started once I got Ginny. So having Ginny was it was the best decision for me in the long run, and it's got me where I am. However, it wasn't really an ideal situation for a child of my riding ability and everything that I could do, and it's a damn good reason why teenagers shouldn't be training horses, really, not on their own. Ginny was 4 years old. I'd spent 6 months or so, or a year, about 6 months or so beforehand, working with her old owner, who's a good friend of mine, training her, breaking her in, helping to break her in, and just working with her before she was happy for me to take her, or for my mum to buy her for me to have. So when I first got Ginny, most of the first year, I think, largely the first year, was spent me trying to stay on. Ginny was obviously 4 years old, very unbalanced. I'd only ever ridden riding school horses. I wasn't a brilliant rider. I was braver than I deserved to be. And when it came to cantering, she would just throw me off. She'd throw a buck in and she'd just chop me straight off. But she'd only do this on the corners. So anytime I tried to canter around a corner, she'd butt me off. So while I was riding, I'd often try 3, 4, I think I tried 6 times once. I'd try quite a few times to get her to canter around a corner without bucking me off before I'd end up giving up and just cantering down the straight lines for a little while. After a while of this, the yard owner, bless her, she came out and she said, well, you're a confident rider, being thrown off this many times, this consistently, and in nothing changing, you need a bit of help. So she stepped in and showed me how to hold on to my saddle and just to push her through it and sit on through the buck and help me ride through the buck so that we could just push through the behaviour. Looking back, it was largely a balance issue, I think. Ginny was struggling to balance round the corners, and with me not being a very good rider, I couldn't help her, so she ditched the extra weight. I was often probably pulling her off balance as well with my poor riding. So once we solved the issue of being able to canter on her, I spent a lot of time after that just playing with her. I would run around the school. We had a big 60 by 60 school, so I'd just bomb around that most of the time. Really properly irresponsible ownership. My mum wasn't horsey at all and knew nothing about horses, so warm-ups were negligible, cool-downs were negligible, and we spent most of our time just bombing around this school and bombing around the countryside with her. I was jumping her most days over decent-sized fences as well as a young horse, usually going way too fast and falling off either before or after the fence, because she also, when you're charging horses at fences, they're often getting the striding wrong, and so she was not uncommon for a nasty, she'd put in some dirty stops and have me off. So moving on from my falling off era, which lasted a while, I there was a fun day at the yard I was on. They did an open day, and they had some guy come out. I can't remember who he is, but he trained under Monty Roberts, and I was fascinated by it. And I already had this kind of dream I'd wanted to be a cowboy, and then as I started looking into more natural horsemanship methods, that drew me more towards my interest towards the Western side of things. Now, Western was largely not accessible to me, so it was all bareback. I'd use a rope halters that I'd made, and God, some of the equipment I fashioned for that horse is horrific to look back on. So I just played around with her a lot. I taught her to rear, I taught her to lie down, largely in hugely unethical ways of doing it, large shortcuts, from videos that I'd found on YouTube, which weren't great, let's be honest. A lot of the videos were force your horse to lie down, force your horse to rear up, push them to rear up, don't teach them how to do these things. So a lot of this stuff, as I moved on with Ginny, I put a stop to a lot of the behaviours because they were trained through stress, so she got stressed while performing them. But yeah, so I started to develop a bit of an interest in the natural horsemanship and the western side of things, and I thought it was cool as hell. All I ever wanted to do was go hacking with my horse for miles and camp out overnight and then carry on hacking. But the UK doesn't really accommodate that, or where I was anyway. I didn't have the option to travel to places, and there was no way in hell I think my mum would take me on my pony up to somewhere like Scotland or Wales to go camping out for a weekend over the mountains on my own as a teenager. Understandably, but I weren't right happy about it. So as I got through that, I moved through a few different yards, and on different yards, different people wanted help riding their horses, so I got a lot of experience breaking in some ponies at that first yard I was on, some very unhandled ponies, well-handled ponies. I had a great time. I worked with lots of different ex-hunters, ex-eventers, ex-dressage horses, schoolmasters, exercising little ponies for kids that were starting to misbehave and stuff. My job was oftentimes to keep on top of my friends' little kids' ponies and exercise them when they didn't get chance. During all this stuff, I struggled at school with being bullied. I was having troubles at home with my dad and stuff like that. So during all this, I was going through quite a tumultuous time in my life, and I was very emotional, didn't understand what was happening, didn't understand why I was feeling the way I was doing. And oftentimes during my training, especially with Ginny, more so with Ginny than anyone else's horses, because it was harder to control myself with my own animals. But I'd often end up having huge emotional breakdowns when training wasn't going right and taking it out on Ginny, and she put up with a lot of my shit, bless her. When I was having bad days, she seemed to do this thing where she'd push and push and push, and until I cracked, and then I'd bawl my eyes out, and then we'd have a great session after that. And Ginny was very good. It seems like a weird thing for me to say, but she was a very emotionally intelligent horse. She did a lot for me in helping me when I was having hard times, even sometimes by not behaving. And whether that was because my attitude was creating these behaviours in her, but I don't think so, not with Ginny. She's always been very in tune to those things with different people, and with horses as well. In the time I had her, she only ever had one physio session in the years I had her, and that was when I was about 20. So from 13 to 20 years old, she had 3. So 13 to 20 years old, this mare had 3 physio sessions. She only ever came up lame once, and I think she'd got kicked. We didn't even get her checked out for that, fucking hell. She was lame for weeks as well, bless her. We just left her out in the field and she came sound on her own. Poor fucking horse. But yeah, she did it, even when she was in fields with other horses that had trouble regulating their emotions. The reason I got the physio out for her myself when I was 20 was because there was a horse in the field with her that had really, really overbuilt shoulders and really tense under the side of her neck. And Ginny was always very low in the head. She looked very quarter horsey in the way she carried herself, very Western horse. And she'd started to build up all these muscles, and the other horse in the field had started to lose them. So it was really interesting. And he started to relax. She started to get stressed out. I treated her, and then the whole herd just started to relax. And since then, I've heard of some horses acting a little bit like emotional sponges for other horses and for people. I haven't looked too much into it, but I can well believe it. I've seen it for myself, where these changes in Ginny, where the situation didn't cause it. It was literally as she went into the field with this horse. So Ginny's always been a very, very special part of my life. She lives with a friend now. I gave her away to a friend of mine a few years back. So I moved yards a few times, a few different livery yards with Ginny, for various reasons. And I went to this yard that had ran a rescue for racehorses, ex-racehorses, a place for a few of them to retire. Weren't really a rescue, I don't think. It was more just people taking on a few ex-racehorses and getting a few people to pay for them. They used to breed racehorses and sell them, and that had all stopped due to the owner's health. He got cancer, and then as he was getting better, he rescued a few horses and things like that. So while I was there, a bloke called Jim came and helped out. He came and helped a little bit, and I was breaking in their youngster Hobnob, who only had one eye. He was a horse they'd bred. Apparently he'd been sent off to breakers' yards, and they'd sent him back that he was a fucking nut job. He was very difficult to handle when I turned up there. He was on a stud chain, being led about. He was out of control. And I started doing the groundwork with him. I started breaking him in. He never had a rug on. You couldn't get a rug on him. I got him doing all those things. I think I was probably about 14, 15 at the time. But yeah, then Jim came, and there were a few decent holes in my training. Obviously 14, 15 years old, you don't know it all. And there were a few things I was struggling with, like transferring what he could see to stuff that he couldn't see. Things with Ginny that she'd just cut corners and often barge into me when I was sending her out on the lunge. And Jim just kind of stepped in and filled those gaps for me and showed me when I can place a little bit of punishment in, when I can use my rope to touch the horses, and, well, at the time it was smack the horses with the rope and move them away from you and be more effective with my cues and what I'm asking of the horses. So from there, Jim helped me a lot. He took me to his yard, we worked with his horses, he took me on a clinic with him, we went and worked with some other horses, though that was fucking chaos. Not due to Jim, due to the owners of those horses. It was mental. 3 Andalusian stallions, and it was absolute chaos, absolute fucking chaos. Jim got attacked by one of the stallions. It was not ideal. And he paid me for it as well, bless him. I was only there to watch and learn, but he paid me to come down. And so from there, I then went and did, when I got to 16 and I left school, I started doing a work-based diploma at another riding school that I'd learnt to ride when I was younger. I'd been doing some of the summer league show jump. I've been doing the summer league show jumping there because they were a ride away from that yard I was on. I could ride down a bridle path and then down the road to be at that yard, because I never had transport for Ginny growing up. So getting to shows and stuff that I like to do was really difficult. So I got to know them all again. They all started to remember me from when I was younger, because I'd been there a while. When I was a kid, I'd been there a few times back and forth between riding schools. And so I went and did my work-based diploma there. But while I was there, I got offered a job from another riding school that were old family friends of ours. And at the time, my mum had lost her job and she offered me an apprenticeship there. So while the yard that I'd been at had been massively helpful to me and I really appreciated everything they did, and I'm still good friends with them now, I chose to go to do this apprenticeship because they were offering me more opportunities as well, and I learnt to groom there. I groomed for their daughter, who was a young event rider, and I groomed under Dave Burton, I think his name is. He taught me how to groom, and what else was there? I got to break in their young horse. I I got to work with the eventers. One of the eventers was sticky loading, and growing up, Ginny was very difficult to load, and it still is quite difficult to load because she learned all the tricks of the trade of. Basically, she helped me learn how to teach horses to load, so she learned every out that there was, and so even to this day, she is quite tricky to load. I can still load her. It just takes a bit of time and a bit of work and a bit of effort and thought, because there was a lot of stress involved with loading, which I don't think will ever be fixed. So yeah, and there's a few other horses through my teenage years that I taught to load. Took me hours because I was still figuring it out, but I'd managed to do it. And yeah, so I taught Roberto to load, but he always stayed a bit sticky. He'd nap for weird things. He'd nap leaving the stable, he'd nap leaving the field, he refused to load. He was Roberto. His personality was he was very, very lazy. When in eventing, we had to keep him, for him to event at the level he was at, we had to keep him at 2 levels higher fitness wise, otherwise he didn't want to do it and he wouldn't put the effort in, so he had to be kept way fitter than he needed to be. So anything that required a bit of effort from Roberto, he was very reluctant to partake unless you showed him a reason why it was worth doing. At the time, I was very pressure release, heavy punishment, because on the yard I was at the time, the yard owners didn't really know this at the time. They didn't know what was going on. The old family friends that we had that invited me to work there, the yard manager was horrible to the horses, like absolutely awful to the horses, and I was starting to learn and think that to work with horses at the higher calibers and in the higher levels, and to work with these professional horses that I wanted to work with, and these warm bloods, these hotter horses that I wanted to work with, that I had to be just as cruel and just as angry all the time and deal out the same amount of punishment that she did. And through that process of that, I started getting very angry with the horses all the time. I was getting frustrated and I was taking my temper out on them all the time, and it was never as harsh as I ever got with Ginny, because they weren't my horses, but God, it could be frustrating working with those horses sometimes, because I never really got to fix all the problems I never really got to work on working with all the problems. The only horse I ever really got to deal with properly was the youngster that I broke in. And so I was very limited on what I could do, although, because the horses were still in work, there was no way that they'd have stopped working for 2 months while I fixed all these behaviours, and I didn't really know how to at the time either. I was still largely playing around and finding myself, but through the environment I was in and the shit I was going through at home and stuff with my dad, you'll hear that pop up. It was always shit going on with my dad. I was getting very annoyed with the horses, to a point even friends of mine that were working on the yard as I left, and as I was talking about it, I was saying, I just feel so angry all the time, and they were like, yeah, you can tell you're getting really pissed off with the horses, and I just don't think you're enjoying it anymore. And I wasn't. I fucking hated working there. Again, it was nothing to do. My favourite times working on that yard was when I used to go to the gallops, used to go grooming, used to go away for shows and stuff like that. I fucking loved doing all that with the owner and her daughter. They were great. The only problem really was the yard manager. There were other issues as well, obviously. There always are, with clashes between what works on a yard and what the owner wants, but that happens on every yard. But it was mostly the yard manager. The yard manager made it fucking miserable for me. And I was only, I think I'd just turned 17 when I started working there, or just before. I think I'd just turned 17 when I started working there, so I never really had the confidence or the knowledge to turn around and say this is wrong, and that I didn't like it. It's just what I thought you had to do to work with horses. And so as I started to feel like that, I decided that it wasn't for me. So when I left the apprenticeship convinced I was never going to work with horses again. I went and stayed with my friend, with the person I bought Ginny off, for a few months, took Ginny up there, stayed with her for a few months, And I remember one very specific memory I had. I had German Shepherds with me. I'd got on Ginny, got her all tacked up. I had a Western saddle as well at the time. I was buzzing about it, Western bridled the lot. So excited. And I went to go for a hack. I'd got her in, got her all groomed, got her all tacked up. Dogs were all behaving themselves. And I went to go take her for a hack down the farm, and I got halfway up the yard, and I just stopped for a minute, and I went, I don't fucking like this anymore. This is shit. I don't want to do this anymore. So I just got off, untacked, put Ginny back in the field, and fucking left. And that was a really defining moment for me, where I really realised I wasn't happy with what I was doing and everything that was going on. So from there, I loaned Ginny out for a few months to this older lady who really enjoyed her, really liked her. She didn't ride her as much as she said she was going to, but I wasn't fussed. Ginny was being looked after and being mollycoddled in the field and stuff. And then I got asked by a para rider to help with their horse. And this was back at the yard that I did my work-based diploma at. So I went back to that yard, and I didn't work on the yard, but I started doing a bit of freelancing just for 40 quid a week. I was working Bert's horse, and I was working the yard owner's horse, because they had come from the same place and was showing similar issues. They'd both had 6 months off for their backs, because they thought something was wrong with the backs. And then I was asked to get on and bring them back into work from their... I was asked to bring them back into work from the time off, because obviously being a power rider, you don't want to be getting on a horse that's not been ridden for 6 months. And I'd met Bert a few times before this at the place where I was doing my apprenticeship, because she got called in to exercise the eventers and school the eventers on time to time. And I used to help her get on, and used to sit in the school and listen to her and talk to her and ask her questions about what she was doing and why. So when she asked me, I was umming and ahhing, because I was still very much in the mindset of I didn't really want to work with horses anymore. But I had no job at the time. I was living at my mum's, and I was a bit stuck in a rut. I didn't know what to do, because I'd put all my eggs in one basket, and at 18 years old I thought I was a bit stuck, really, and I had no other options, which is a silly thing for an 18-year-old to feel like, but that's how I felt. So from there, I worked with those horses. Bert's horse got found to have kissing spines, so I helped her with all the rehab. I did a lot of the training with her, and with the other mare, Aurea, she basically just became my little pony for 2 years. Paula had paid me like 40 quid a week, and I'd ride her every day, most days, get her out and exercise her, hack her out, school her, jump her, do whatever. I kept asking Paula what she wanted her to be, and she said, I'm not really fussed. So I was just kind of carried on with her and just played about with her, really. And that's largely what we did with Wonky as well, is my job was to play with the horses and settle them down and make them comfortable in silly situations and things like that. So we did and most of my work with horses is just fucking around with them, really, when it comes to desensitization and building them to being comfortable with as much as possible, is just mess around with them, play with them, have a good time with them. That's largely what I ended up doing. And then from there, I went on to groom for Bert. I went and did a few internationals with her. There were some things that happened that upset me that I never really talked to her about, I never told her about, and I just, after Wonky won her first international and I went to Qatar, I never really went back. I just didn't, again, I started piling more work on me. I was working for free as well for Bert, so, well, I say for free, she was obviously teaching me, so there was a lot of give back that I got and a lot of experience that I got, and she'd buy me lunch and things like that. So it wasn't entirely one-sided at all. It was just I was working my arse off, and I couldn't afford the fuel to get to the yard and things like that. I couldn't afford my horse's livery, And I had a few other clients and stuff along the way, but I was charging way too little because of my age and inexperience, and I just wasn't making a living. And again, it started making me miserable. I started to get a bit short with the horses. I started to get frustrated. I was getting tired. I was getting ill. And yeah, I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want to work with the horses anymore. But I'd been feeling like that from several years before that, and then I just kept taking on more work. I was doing lots of house sitting with horses and stuff like that, but then because I was too tired, I wasn't doing the jobs properly. I wasn't getting all the poo picking done. It wasn't going well. I was burnt out. I was burning out, and to try and fix that, I took on more work, especially as I'd also, like an idiot, taken out a £17,000 loan to get my business off the ground. So that was costing me a fortune. I was living on credit cards, and I'd blown through 17 grand, because who the fuck gives an 18-year-old 17 grand? Who does that? Fucking stupid. I ruined my credit through these first few years. As an adult, I just trashed it. Credit cards, overdrafts. I went to university to study animal behaviour, dropped out of that after 3 months. What else did I do? Before I went to university, I went to college while doing all this with Bert. I did a sports science degree. So I did quite a few things on the side as well, trying to find my way a bit. It just never really happened. We had to leave our family home growing up, the house I'd lived in for about 11 years, because things just weren't right with the landlord and things not getting fixed in the house. House was now fucking expensive to rent for mum and me when my brothers had moved out. So we moved house, and yeah, there was just generally a lot going on at that time for me, and I was just burning out. I couldn't cope with it anymore, and I stopped working with the horses again. I put Ginny on livery somewhere, and I worked for Amazon for a while, because my mum had got a job with Amazon doing logistics. I got a job as a driver with Amazon. And then my friends asked me to loan Ginny, so I moved back up to the person I bought Ginny from, and she was on livery down at this woman's yard. Fucking insane woman, absolutely insane. It was crazy trying to deal with her. Absolutely, she wanted Ginny. That was the thing. She really wanted Ginny to be hers, and I paid £150 a month, and she just looked after Ginny for me, because I could never do anything right whenever I did anything. So it wasn't a very expensive for full livery essentially, but that was what happened really. And then when I moved up to Sarah's and lived with her again I only went to stay for a couple of weeks because I was having a rough time. I just wanted to get away from things, and then I moved there. I never really left, and I was just feeling really down and feeling like shit, so I stayed there. I'd got some parrots by this point as well. I had some pet parrots that I was free flying and things like that, and Sarah very kindly let me stay at hers and kept the parrots at hers. We built aviaries for her. Ginny at this point I then put on loan to my friends, and they wanted to keep her at the same yard. I said that was fine, but it wouldn't last very long, because once it was a friend of theirs that they had introduced me to, that I was keeping Ginny with, but they didn't know her very well as they thought they did, I don't think. When they took Ginny on loan, things started to fall apart at that yard, and they asked me if they could move her, and I was like, I knew this was coming. There was no way anyone could stay at that yard while going down daily to look after the horse. It would be impossible, because the woman was insane. There was nothing anyone could do right. So I went down, helped them move Ginny to a yard that I had previously been to, that was just a stand in between while they were waiting to get onto the yard that they wanted to get onto. That was all chaotic and crazy, and the woman made life a lot harder than she needed to. Parked a trailer in front of the gate so we couldn't get Ginny out, but I managed to squeeze her through. She did whack her hip on the gate post because of it, but I managed to get her out of there. So that was that chaos sorted, and after a while, like I said, I was convinced I was done with horses. I hadn't seen Ginny in ages. I went down and had hi Ginny, you alright, sat on her for a bit, but it was a bit fun, but it didn't really have the spark that it used to have for me. After a while, I asked them if they wanted to have Ginny, and Ginny could just be theirs because they were ringing me up for silly things. They were new to horses, they'd never had horses before, they'd ring me up for things. One thing I had as part of the contract for the loan was that Ginny's mane wasn't to be cut or to be pulled, it needed to stay long because I'd worked for years to get that mane long on her. And I remember getting a very nervous phone call when I was going down to see her one day because there's 3 of them that were sharing her together, and one of them had cut her feathers on her fetlocks, which I wasn't asked about. She had nothing spectacular with her feathers. They were quite thick, but they were like literally just on the back of her fetlocks. There was nothing. They weren't like gypsy cob feathers or anything special. Why they'd need keeping. They were just feathers. I wasn't asked about them being cut at all. So I was just getting little phone calls about things because I weren't sure, which I didn't mind, but it was very much with the loan agreement was she's your horse to do what you want with, just don't cut her mane and let me know where she is. That's all I cared about. Vet's bills are your problem, blah, 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 blah. When she had her eye removed, I put 200 quid, I think, into that, getting her eye removed because it was something that should have been done a long time before they got her, but I got told she wasn't in pain, but after getting the eye removed, it was quite obvious that it was causing her pain with the way she held herself. So she'd gone for years with a eyeball that was dying, basically. It was a dead eye, and I'd got told that she wasn't in pain. We can remove it if you want, but it's not going to do any harm. Stay in there. But while she was in their care, I think she whacked it or something, did some more damage to it, so it had to be removed. And then once it was gone, it was fairly obvious that, she wasn't comfortable for a long time with it, bless her. That horse put up with a lot of shit from me, that poor animal. So I asked them if they wanted to have her. They gave me a quid for her. I don't think they actually ever gave me the quid for her, but it don't fucking matter, I don't care. But yeah, it was an IOU, a quid, because to transfer ownership, you have to pay for them or something like that. I don't really care. Ginny's theirs now, and they do a fantastic job looking after her. She's now retired completely because she's developed arthritis. She dishes in her front right leg, so her far fore. So she developed arthritis in that knee and she's had to stop work now. So now she lives the life of luxury in a field. But yeah, so while I was working in Amazon, I was living up in Lincoln, not mid-Lincolnshire, North Lincolnshire, West-ish Lincolnshire, near Gainsborough. I was working for Amazon, flying my parrots, and then I got into dog training. I found a dog trainer online that I really liked, and I liked the idea of getting into protection sports. So got into protection sports, and then Amazon. I wasn't a very good Amazon delivery driver. I was a particularly poor Amazon delivery driver. I could never deliver on time. But my mum, working in logistics, got me to do a lot of the recruitment drives for Amazon, so I ended up not actually having to do a lot of delivery driving. But obviously for Amazon, that's very seasonal, and a lot of that work had started to dry up. So I needed to get another job, so I went and started doing security with my dogs. Doing security while having parrots living at home, because security was always miles down south. I was spending weeks away from home at a time, and Sarah was looking after my parrots for me. But she just doesn't know anything about parrots, can't recognise illness. I had 6 of the parrots that were all green, so they all looked the same, so she didn't even notice when one was missing and I came home and one had died. At which point I decided, obviously, I'm not in a position to look after them anymore, and I got rid of all but 2 of them, and I took 2 of them with me in the van, and we did security. I did security with these parrots in the van, which was fucking chaos. I don't know why I tried to do that. One of them free flew, one of them was feral, but I took one of my aviaries with me that I used to put up on site with me wherever I went, so they'd be able to stay in their aviaries. And it worked out all right. It just wasn't ideal. It was very hot in the van, and oftentimes I wouldn't be able to put my aviary up somewhere because I'd have to park in a lay-by somewhere, and I didn't want them being nicked. One of the sites I was on, someone let one of my parrots go. Obviously, the free flyer came home. The one that was barely tame obviously didn't, but I got him back about 7 months later. And when the free flyer died, I got rid of the untamed one, Tetch. He was nice, he was lovely, but I rehomed him to someone who had huge aviaries and stuff like that, and they came down from Scotland to come and get him. So that was the end of my parrot saga and Amazon, and I went and worked with security dogs, and I did 3 years in security. I did a year in security before I met my partner, I think. Was it a year or 2 years? I think it was a year I did in security before I met my current partner, Luke. I met him through the dogs. And yeah, I learnt a lot of lessons through training with the protection dogs. I had a dog who was very, very handler aggressive. He ended up getting put down due to seizures. He was one of the hardest dogs in my life, but it taught me. Working with the protection dogs was really interesting because with horses, you're working with animals that their instincts are to run and to run away. So it's very easy to bully horses through training into doing what you want them to do when you shouldn't do. Especially with the methods I use, the natural horsemanship methods. I learned through several of the horses that I'd worked with, through ignorance, that you can push horses through pain if you make it miserable enough for them not to react to their pain. And some pretty severe pain as well. I had one client, not a client, it was at one of the yards I was working on, it was one of their clients. They'd brought it in for livery to get back into work and stuff like that, but it was decking people as you try to get on it. I was terrified of this horse, so I was really over harsh on it, and again, this was back before I'd had my break from horses, so I was getting very angry with the horses. I didn't want to get on it, I didn't want to do this work with it, but I basically got told I had to do it, it was my job. So I did. I've actually got videos still of me working with that horse, which I will post up on my Patreon, and explain what happened and why it went the way it did. And essentially this horse, decked anyone that tried to get on it. And I wasn't sure about it. I didn't want to do it. I was scared. It was terrifying, this horse. It absolutely terrified me. So I was very defensive while working with it. I was really overly hard on the horse, and I got him to tolerate people riding him for quite a while as well. He then left the yard, and I think from what I heard, he threw someone off and either paralysed them or broke their back in several places or something like that. He did very serious damage to someone. And upon inspection, he had severe kissing spines. So I learned you can push horses using these methods. If you're not careful and you're not empathetic and you're not paying attention to the horse, you can push them through almost any amounts of pain to get them to do as they're told. And so that was where I put a dead stop to that. I'm very careful now. I'm still using the same methods, but I'm very careful with them that I'm not pushing horses too far. I'm not pushing horses through pain. If something is consistently not working when it works normally with other horses, and I've tried a few different things, chances are there's pain involved. If something is glaringly obvious to me that it's a pain issue, I'll suggest a farrier, chiro, vet, whatever that needs to see them before I'll carry on with the horse. But oftentimes people are very quick to jump to getting a vet out for behavioural issues, when I think it is worth getting a trainer out first to see if it is a pain issue. If you get your trainer out and they can very easily work through the problems, you can save yourself a massive vet's bill. But if you get a trainer out and then they turn around and say this needs a vet or this needs a chiropractor, there's something else going on, then you've cost yourself an extra, in my case, 50 to however much it is for that session. I personally, vets for me are, I will get a vet out if I need to, but if I can get a farrier out instead of a vet for things like abscesses, I will do. Vets are usually not my first port of call for issues with horses. If it's lameness, I'll call a farrier first. I know a lot of chiropractors and physios won't touch horses when they've presented lame, but I'll often get them to just give their general opinion on what they think it is, because sometimes it just give it a bit of rest, the horse will be fine. You don't need all this investigation work. Sometimes you can give them 2 weeks off and they're all good, they've just pulled something. And then progress from there to a vet. So that's always my go-to with horses. So if you've got a behavioural issue and they have vets and they have their checkups regularly, if the behaviour issue pops out of nowhere, yeah, get your vet out. But if the behaviour issue has slowly been progressing and you can see the steps it's been taking to get to the point where you've decided you need help, I think it is worth getting a trainer out first to have a look at them before you go investigating and potentially finding that nothing's wrong. Because a trainer can oftentimes, especially good trainers that take into account that the horse might be in pain because they might just be struggling, it might be a place that's tight, and then they can suggest physios or whatever from there to help with certain things, because I work on getting the horses to release in their body. So if a horse is doing all the same patterns or they're really struggling to do something, and I've tried lots of different ways to get it done, chances are they are refusing to do that for a reason. Something's hurting, something's stopping them and preventing them from doing it. However, there are also situations where I've worked alongside clients who are working with vets. They know there's a problem with the horse, but the instructions from the vet are to carry on, it won't get better without work. And so you do sometimes have to push the horse through a little bit of pain, because that's the only way you're going to improve them. And it's shit, but unfortunately that's horses and that's life, and that's how it goes with horses sometimes, and there's not much you can do about it. Sometimes we just have to go, I know it's shit, I know it sucks, I know it's uncomfortable, but we've just got to get through this. And that's where these methods that can push horses through a bit of pain can be useful. But again, you have to be careful and you have to be empathetic. There's no point asking a horse that's having pain issues to do the same steps as a horse that's got no issues. You ask them to do less of it just because they're going to improve as they get stronger, but you can't ask them to take the big steps that these horses that aren't struggling are taking. And even if you don't know there's a pain issue involved, like I've got a 3-year-old currently that I'm working with, they've had the vet out, they say he's probably a bit weak in his right hind, we don't know if something's going on, but horses get weakness on either side, and before we go, and he is improving, he's just improving slowly, very slowly, because his personality also doesn't help with his training either. His personality clashes largely with training. He's obviously weaker on one side, so doing things are a little bit harder for him. And before we go down the investigation route of is there something seriously wrong with him, which I don't think there is, because we are making very good progress with him now. We've got through to him and found the ways to work with him. But chances are he may need to have some sort of looking at later on. They may develop ulcers at some point. The vets did suggest maybe scoping him in the future, because some of his behaviours suggest potential ulcers, but then a lot of his behaviours don't suggest it. So it's difficult with young horses. We're always finding out things that are wrong. When we hit a stopping point, if we hit a stopping point, I'll probably be like, right, now's time to, I think it's really good time to start actually having a look into him. But he's not a horse that's going to be easy to do vet treatments with without this groundwork that we're doing. He'll be very difficult to work with for the vet. So it's part and parcel of it. You can't fix behaviours that are caused by physical issues, but sometimes the physical issues are caused by the behaviours. So you've got a horse that's consistently stressed, it's going to keep throwing ulcers over and over and over again. So you've got to treat the stress to treat the ulcers, and then you've also got to treat the ulcers so that they don't create stress. It's a bit of a minefield working with horses, especially when they get to the behaviours that I often deal with. You've got to be very careful, and there's a fine line between pushing them too far, not asking enough. Some horses, oftentimes by the time I get to them, they can take the piss. A lot of people think there's two sides of it with horses, where people think horses do not take the piss and horses cannot take the piss, and horses do take the piss. But sometimes horses learn through the pain that they can get away with certain behaviours. So regardless of fixing the issue that caused them to do the behaviour, they have now learnt to do this behaviour now, and that needs fixing. And oftentimes this has to be done alongside the treatment, because without the treatment, the behaviour won't get, like I said, I've already said that once, but like I said, the treatment won't get better. The illness won't get better without the behavioural modification, and the behaviour won't get better without the physical treatments. So you have to do everything hand in hand and all together. It's all one big it's all a lot of different professionals that go into maintaining horses properly. So yeah, back to where I was working with protection dogs and horses being easy to bully. Horses, like I said, they can be really easy to bully, and no matter how difficult a horse is, if you add enough pressure, you will get the results you want. It depends on your moralities and how far you're willing to push it. So there are people quite well known. There's a very, very well known trainer. I won't name him because I don't think I should. I don't like to shit on other trainers, but very successful. But his methods are what I would consider unethical. He produces horses worth millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. He's very successful at what he does. He deals with very tricky horses. He can deal with anything. You can deal with anything when you're willing to go anywhere, really, to get the behaviours you want from horses. I have a line. My line of what's ethical may be higher than others, but I come in and work with some very, very difficult and very, very dangerous horses, and the line of what I'm willing to do to keep myself safe is probably a bit higher than what a lot of people who don't do this professionally would rather, or people who are in part of the R+ community in the horse world. They would say it was unethical, the pressures that I use, but I don't. And as I'm learning more, the pressure that I use gets lower and lower, but I'm still quite firm on the fact that horses shouldn't kick you, they shouldn't bite you, and they shouldn't strike at you, and they shouldn't be rearing up. The whole point of what I do is to show the horses that we're listening and we're trying our hardest and we're doing everything best we can. Don't kick us. We can't help you if you put us in hospital, basically. And sometimes when I come into a horse that's already at a very high level of stress, the pressure to get through to that horse that it can't flatten me, kick me, bite me or rear is quite high. As soon as I can bring that pressure down and still get through to the horse, I will. But yes, back to the protection dogs. I keep going off on tangents. So the protection dogs taught me that you can't do that, because with protection dogs, what you've got dogs that are trained and bred to fight people. They're bred for their toughness, to push through pressure, and pressure with dogs is hitting them with sticks, hitting them with your hands, with barrels, all sorts of things. They're taught to push through that stuff, because a dog's doing protection work that runs off when someone screams or hits it is going to be no good. So these are dogs that are bred and trained to argue with people. And unfortunately, some dogs are very handler soft and they won't argue back with you, and you can bully them. But any good protection dogs, really solid protection dogs that have solid genetics for the job, and they're not being built from soft dogs, they'll come back at you if they feel like you're being unfair, if you're a bit pissed off that day, so your punishments on the chain or the corrections that you place are harsher than they deserve to be for whatever that hot dog was doing at that point. They'll come back at you and they'll have you for it. And I got forced especially by Brax, to get a handle on that and get a control of it, because the horses don't push for that. Horses really don't push for you to be able to control your emotions. If anything, they benefit. Owners and riders benefit from losing their temper with the horses, because oftentimes it will quieten the horses down, it will shut them down. So the protection dogs forced me to control my emotions, deal with my frustrations outside of the training, and that was the only way I was going to get anywhere. Brax got put down just because he was having seizures, but my partner still has a dog who fucking hates me, for one. He doesn't hate me. He's a one-person dog, so he loves Luke. Anyone else can get fucked. He tolerates me. I can stroke him. I can play with him. And that's the most anyone other than Luke can do. So we tolerate each other. I'm not a fan of him either. He's a big oaf and he's a bit of an idiot. So bit of a personality clash there between me and my partner's dog. But regardless of all those personality clashes, I'm the one that's more intelligent here. It's my job to make sure that we're not having scraps every day. Sometimes I get a bit annoyed with him and I'll shout at him for screaming his head off because he's a gobshite and he just won't stop screaming sometimes. But he quickly reminds me that I need to control I can't just get annoyed at him. And when I get annoyed at him, it has to be fair. It's not that you can't get annoyed at him. It's just it has to be due to him and what he's doing. It can't be outside influences that cause me to be short-tempered with him or not have the time for him, and days where I do feel like that he doesn't come in the house because it just wouldn't be safe. So taking all those lessons that the protection dogs taught me with the methods that I learned growing up, I've found myself a nice little niche where I can ask quite a lot of horses whether they're struggling, whether they're in pain, if they need pushing through it. Obviously, I have to be certain if they're in pain that they need pushing through it. There has to be vet investigations, chiros, physios. There have to be other professionals in the works for me to be able to do that. I am not a vet. I am not a physio. I've done some physio courses and stuff like that, but I am not qualified in those areas. So when it comes to horses with physical issues, I'm making sure that I'm up to date with the vet information and the physio information and what's going on, and that they're happy with the progress the horse is making. Any signs that things aren't quite right, I'll change things, or we'll step back and reevaluate where we need to go with the horse. So if there's a pain issue, I will make sure that the horse is under proper care to make sure we're going in the right direction and this is the right thing for the horse. I'll never at any point decide for a vet, in the place of a vet or a physio, that a horse should just carry on working if I think there's any sort of pain involved. Emergency situations not included. If a horse needs to load and it's in pain, I can up these methods, I can up my pressures and stuff like that. Say the horse is in pain, needs to load, it needs to get to a vet. I'll do anything to get it on at that point. Being hard in those moments on horses, it doesn't sit well with me and I feel bad for doing it. But at the end of the day, I'd rather the horses get the treatment they need than me sit guilt-free that I was soft on the horse in a moment where it needed me to be harder on it to get it somewhere it needed to go. So yeah, after the protection dogs and Brax dying really, really affected me quite badly, because I feel like there are a lot of things I could have done better by him, and that things that went on with us, he might not have been so poorly if things had gone better, if I'd have been in a position to rehome him earlier. But there were other complications that went on with Brax that made it just not an option, really. He came to me through a rescue and he had to go back to that rescue, and that rescue didn't have the funds or the people or the knowledge to be able to deal with him, whereas I had friends that were capable of dealing with him and willing to deal with him and take him on because he was a good dog. And they wouldn't work with that rescue, and the rescue wouldn't let me rehome him outside of the rescue. So it was quite a sad situation that I feel like I was boxed into a corner with, and unfortunately I think it cost Brax's life. I don't know for sure, you can never, but yeah, it's something that sits on me, that. And so outside of that, once I'd finished working with Brax, before I finished doing security, I'd started to look at some of my old videos and started to miss the horses. I'd been down to see Ginny a few times. I'd had a sit on her before she retired. It started to give me a bit of a buzz. There was I had an old client from that first yard I did my apprenticeship on. They rang me up at one point to ask me to help with loading one of their homebreds because she'd become very difficult to load, and there'd been several times now where they'd paid for events to go to and hadn't been able to make it because she wouldn't load. So I went down and worked with her, and while I was a bit rusty and the sessions weren't the greatest, I think I had 3 or 4 sessions with her, teaching her how to load. And as far as I know, they've not had any problems since. Which I like to leave my loading clients with horses that don't have issues going forwards, or if they do have issues going forwards, the clients know how to deal with it. That kind of gave me a little bit of an itch, and then I got a job back at that yard again after I quit security. I think there was a bit of overlap in the security and working on the yard. I was working over Christmas while I was working there. I was working day shifts on the yard, sometimes like 11-hour shifts on the yard, and then doing 12-hour night shifts. It absolutely ruined me, that. And things were just difficult on the yard. A lot of the staff wasn't pulling their weight, and I was living in Grimsby, the yard's down by Grantham. Travelling back and forth was just too much, because it was supposed to be with accommodation, and then the accommodation fell through. So travelling back and forth was too much for me. And then I went back to doing some freelancing. I messaged a load of my old clients. A lot of them jumped at the opportunity to have me back, which was really nice. But again, I was working for very little money. I was charging £25 a session, £30 a session to work with some of these really quite dangerous horses. So again, I was struggling for money all the time. So I went and got a job at a riding school close to me to make up the money, which I worked there for almost a year. To be fair, it's not that long since I left there, and I left there for other opportunities which have since fell through. I really enjoyed working there. I was working on the yard initially, and then I got some teaching hours, and then I stopped working on the yard and just teaching. And I really enjoyed teaching. I absolutely love teaching people how to ride, kids how to ride. I fucking love it. As long as the kids and the people are just as into it as I am. It's not fun teaching kids how to ride when the parents want them to ride and the kids are crying their eyes out. That's not so fun. So yeah, I loved working there. It really, really enjoyed working there. I don't think a lot of the other people on the yard liked me. I felt a bit lonely while I was there. I didn't really feel like I was liked very much. I feel like because of my experience and the things I'd done, people thought I was maybe judging them for things. I'm not the most politically correct person. I'll put my foot in my mouth a lot of the time, saying things that might upset people when I don't mean it to. I don't work right well on big yards. I find it hard with all the socialisation, with all these different people, all these different clients all the time. I find it tricky. Because all that stuff that upset me about being at the yard could very well have been in my own head. No one ever told me they didn't like me. No one was ever outright horrible to me or anything like that. I just felt like that. But I feel like that in a lot of situations. So that's nothing to do with the yard. I loved the yard. I loved working there. I loved teaching. The yard owner's great. The yard manager was quite easily the best yard manager I have ever met, worked under, and had the privilege to meet. She was fantastic. Any yard would be well off with a yard manager like her. All the staff were grafters. They were all really hard workers. Everyone pulled their weight. It was a really fantastic yard to work on. I loved it there. Bar my own insecurities in my head that I'm not sure are real. So yeah, that then brings me to now. I've been working for a few months solely freelance, and I was travelling up and down the country for several months now. So I live in Grimsby. I'm based North Lincolnshire way, and I was travelling down to Hereford every Wednesday morning. I'd set off at like 4-5 o'clock in the morning to be down for Hereford, and then I got a loading course booked in, so I'd set off at 5 o'clock. So Tuesdays I go down to Grantham. I work down in South Lincolnshire, which I'm still doing, and then Wednesdays I would go across to Shropshire. I'd stay down in Grantham. I'd go across to Shropshire from 5 o'clock in the morning, do a loading course down there, do one of my loading clients in Shropshire, and then from Shropshire I'd drive down to Hereford. I'd do a couple of clients there, and then on my way back past Birmingham sort of way, that route, I'd do a detour and do another client on my way back home, and then I'd go home for Thursday, and then I have a loading client which only started recently, but that's down in Hertfordshire. So then Friday I'll be setting off down to Hertfordshire and then back up in the same day, and with my own field and my own horses at the same time. It was getting too much, and it made me a bit unwell. So that brings us to here. I needed to find So I needed to come up with a way of... I've wanted to do an online archive of videos for a long time, but I didn't really know how to do it. I never really clocked on to Patreon being something that I could do this with. I thought I would need the initial money to be able to set up a website and pay someone to set up a website for me. Well, I don't need to pay someone because I've got a very good friend of mine that helps me out with this stuff, but she, I didn't want to have to ask too much of her because she does it for free, and I know for a fact that what she does for me is really valuable, and I don't want to ask too much of her and ask her to do too much for me. So I needed to find myself a little revenue stream that doesn't include me travelling up and down the country all the time. I'm still going to do bits of my travel. I've still got my loading clients, but I had to cancel all the Hereford lot. I think what my plan is in the new year to maybe do it once a month, so I'm not doing it so much, and I can do it all in a big loop once a month. So yeah, that's a bit about my life, how I've ended up where I am, what I do, how I've got to where there's huge gaps in it as well. There's a lot of people I've missed that have helped me out along the way. And I don't particularly want to name people in case they don't really want to be named. There's a few people I've named, but there's a lot of people that have helped me out along the way and taught me a lot along the way. I've been very, very lucky with the opportunities I've had. Life's just thrown really good opportunities at me to learn, and yeah, I've been very fortunate with the fact that I've survived. For a start, I survived that first year with Ginny, was quite impressive. So yeah, and now this Patreon is going to be where I'm posting all my videos. Every video I take, I will either edit or not edit. I want to post a lot of the raw footage because I don't think a lot of people do that. They take the bits out that they don't want people to see. They won't take the bad bits out. They make everything look great all the time. Horse training isn't great. Horse training is a slog. You take 2 steps forwards, you take 5 steps back. It's really hard work training horses, especially when you've got a behavioural issue that's stopping you from doing what you want to do with your horse. You spend a fortune making sure it's all okay. You spend a fortune looking after it, and then you can't just take it to a show because it won't load. It becomes very emotionally charged for owners, and there's a lot of conflicting stuff out there as to how to help them. Use food, don't use food, use pressure, don't use pressure. Don't stress your horse out. Don't ever ask your horse to do something that stresses them out. And if you do that, you'll never progress with them. You've got to ask them to be able to deal with stress. They've got to be able to cope with it. Life is stressful. Unfortunately, that's just how things are. And yeah, so I want to show everything. I want to show the bad sessions I have. I want to show the mistakes I make, the assumptions I make that create mistakes. Because it's always, when I have bad sessions, it's always because I've gone in with a plan, 2 solid set, and this is how this session is going to go. And I'm not really looking at the horse properly. That never happens with clients' horses because I'm always going in with... I'm a professional, I go in very differently, but day in, day out with my own horses, I'm going to have days where I'm off. I've got other things on my mind. I've got time limits to go to, whereas with my clients' horses, I make sure they've got plenty of time. There's no rush. There's no expectations of sessions lasting too long either, because that's a big thing in horse training, is if you pay for an hour, people expect an hour. My sessions aren't by the hour, they're by the session, because some sessions will be 15 minutes, some sessions will be 2 hours long. If the session requires a horse to go out for a really long walk, out hacking, I can be out for hours on the horse sometimes, settling them down, getting them to chill out, exploring with them, just messing around with them, having a good time with them. That's really important for their training. So while some sessions will be 15 minutes because the horse has done everything I've asked, they've tried really hard, they've previously struggled, and they've previously put up a lot of argument, if they've done everything in the first 15 minutes that I've asked them to do with things that they've found really difficult and they're trying really hard, if I keep pushing them, they're just going to start arguing and we're going to lose all the progress we've made. So with my clients' horses, I very rarely make those mistakes because I'm not day in, day out with the horses. It's not got the same emotional charge that it does with my own horses, because I'm as flawed as everyone else and I make mistakes, especially with my own animals, where I'm the only one that is, where I'm only accountable to myself. So mistakes like this will happen, things will go wrong, and I want to post them because professionals are human. Whether we have done it for 20 years, 5 years, a year, or for 60 years like some of them, people make mistakes every day with horses, and my clients are no different to me. They'll make mistakes, and they'll probably make more mistakes than I do because they're learning it, and there's no judgment in that. But unfortunately it's hard work and it's draining. It is draining when you're learning something on a horse that struggles. It's very hard work. It's why my pricing is set the way it is. I try and encourage people with the groundwork sessions to let me do the groundwork and set the horse right before teaching you how to do it, because it's very hard on a horse that's struggling to do these things to then also teach someone how to do these things when they don't know themselves. But this podcast has been a lot longer than I planned it being, but this is how my podcasts are largely going to go. If you like them, you like them. They go on massive tangents that oftentimes have nothing to do with what I was originally talking about. I'm a bit chaotic in my head as a person, so follow me on my tangents. This is the podcast just about how I've ended up where I've ended up, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.